Good morning, y'all. We are back with another edition of DNVR Rams Live. As always, I am your host, Justin Michael. Hope everybody's having a solid week. It's been kind of a quiet one in terms of CSU news, so we're gonna have a little bit of fun. We will talk about the latest recruiting news. The Rams picked up a transfer addition at wide receiver. We'll talk about how Petey Tucker, the Georgia State transfer, could factor into the offense this year. We'll get into some of the undrafted Rams at the next level and who might have the best opportunity outside of Torrey Horton to make the roster. Kind of a unique year going into the season from a CSU standpoint. Michael Gallup, Shaq Barrett, both retired at one point, now both hoping to continue their careers. So that'll be kind of a fun storyline to follow throughout the fall. After that, we're going to take a little stroll down memory lane. We're going to get into the top 10 wins of the last decade for CSU football. Not going to lie, classic offseason content, but that's the time of year we're in. Also, coming off of a late night covering the Avs, so I didn't have an opportunity to put together an interview with anybody or anything like that, but we will get some guests on here over the next couple of weeks. Get their perspective on all kinds of things. I'm going to try and get some recruiting guys on here so we can talk about, their viewpoint of CSU going into this season. I'd like to get some NBA draft guys on here so we can talk Nick Clifford, pretty universally projected as a top 20 pick at this point, at very worst, a top 25 prospect. I'll be very curious how high he ultimately goes, because I don't think it's impossible for Nick to end up being a lottery pick. Now, I think that 15 to 20 range is probably a little bit more realistic, but with his versatility, with his athleticism, I just think that his game is going to translate really well at the next level. And I think there are a lot of teams that could use a wing with his skill set, a 3-level scorer who can defend maybe not 1 through 5 in the NBA, but certainly has some versatility with the different groups he's able to be a capable defender against. I think 1 through 4 he would be all right. So we'll talk a lot about all that stuff in the coming weeks. Maybe we can even get Nick on the show. That would be a blast. He's a great guy. He's one of the Rams I've enjoyed covering the most in my career. So I'll certainly be rooting for him. I will be getting his jersey wherever he goes, so long as it's not like the Lakers or something. I just can't do it out of principle. Would love to see him land in Denver. Jacob in the Toyota chat says Nick to the Nuggets would be an insane storyline. Could you imagine? Colorado kid lands with the Nuggets, played at CU and CSU, gets to play for the hometown team. Now it'd be amazing on multiple fronts. I mean, obviously just from the local storyline angle, that would be a blast, but also I think he's kind of exactly what the Nuggets need. I think the opportunity for him to see significant playing time right away would be there. We'll see where the Nuggets fall in terms of draft order. We'll see how aggressive they are. Might have to be willing to move up to ultimately land Nick, but I do know that the interest in Nick Clifford is legitimate from the Nuggets. They were in Fort Collins a lot. I've heard that behind the scenes, that they've made it very clear that they like what he has to offer. So we'll see. Like I said, we'll talk about that here a ton in the coming days and the coming weeks. The other day, we mentioned that Dan Willis, diehard Ram fan, passed away. Wanted to do one more shout out to him and his family. I'm going to miss our interactions. I'm going to, miss engaging with him. One of the all-time great CSU fans. I also want to shout out John Hearn, CSU's historian. You can buy his book, Aggies to Rams. He posted on Twitter that he's moving houses, trying to liquidate some of his copies to Aggies to Rams. I think you can see it here. I've got it in the background. If you're a diehard CSU fan, this is something that you should own. Great way to learn the history of the program. Nobody knows more about CSU football than John Hearn, and we are extremely fortunate as a fan base to have him keeping all of this history alive. And if you want to support a great Ram in John Hearn, pick up a copy of Aggies to Rams while you still can. Before we get into the transfer stuff, and before we talk about Petey Tucker, the Georgia State transfer wide receiver that is now Fort Collins bound, was committed to Eastern Michigan at one point. I'm not sure if he spent the spring there or not. That's kind of what it seems like. I will have to ask him when we ultimately get him on the show, or interview him in the fall. I did just kind of briefly here for a fun little intro segment. I wanted to kind of really off the top of the head talk about like what are the most dramatic moments as a sports fan. Covering Game 6 in Ball Arena last night for the Avalanche, it was obviously intense. Go up big early, then Dallas comes storming back. Mikko Rantanen, former Avs star, has 4 points, looking like the Avs are dead in the water, and then all of a sudden they explode for 4 goals in that third period, end up forcing a Game 7, which is going to be a bucket list experience for me. I'm headed back to Dallas basically right after this show to cover that. But what are the most dramatic moments you could have as a sports fan? If you have anything, throw it out in the Toyota chat. I think a Game 7 in any scenario is obviously going to be up there, but particularly hockey. The intensity of the NHL playoffs is at another level. I think the parity and just the way that really anybody can win on any given night in the NHL, other leagues just don't have it quite at the same level. Like the parity in the NFL is pretty solid, but I still think there's a tier of teams that are just kind of on a different level than everybody else. And I definitely say the same about basketball. I think the gap's even wider on basketball, although it has been a really entertaining first round. But from a college sports standpoint, the NCAA tournament, any single elimination format is always going to be in the conversation. Plus, just the thrill of March Madness and how much it means, how the entire country gets tuned into this one moment. I've talked about that before. One of the things that I love about the NCAA tournament is it's great for college basketball sickos like me who are locked in year round, who are already thinking about the big dance for next year, in June. But it's also fun because of the brackets and everything. You get an opportunity to just engage with all your friends and your coworkers and everything. Like, I just love that it's one of the few moments, a lot like the Super Bowl, where the diehards and the casuals can come together and appreciate it for what it is. Like, it's as deep as you make it. If you want to go full on sports nerd and be locked in, you can do that. You can also just pick your teams based on the mascots, and either way, you're going to have a good time. But the drama of the NCAA tournament, obviously, we experienced it from CSU standpoint, came down to a buzzer beater. I still think that CSU Maryland game was the best game of the NCAA tournament. Sucks from this side of the tracks how it ended up playing out, but that was epic. And I would say, really, outside of that Maryland game, I don't know if I felt the drama and the intensity of a sporting event like I felt last night with that Game 6 on the NHL playoffs. A tie game in basketball, whether it be the playoffs or the regular season, over the last 90 seconds, 2 minutes, that's always going to be up there. Just the pace of the game, and when you get two teams going back and forth, trading shots, going blow for blow, I love that shit. That's some of my favorite stuff in sports. The 2-minute drill in football, you go down a touchdown, but you've got the ball back. Maybe you've got a timeout or two, or a timeout in the 2-minute warning. Can you go 80 yards and either tie the game or win this game? There's nothing quite like the drama of that, but man, there's just something about the NHL playoffs that are at another level. And then when you throw in overtime, we've had a couple of overtime games in this series. I mean, I legitimately get worried about my blood pressure. It's not for the faint of heart. If you're not a hockey guy, and I know we don't have hockey at CSU, so I'm not going to drag on and on about this, but I highly recommend you just give it a shot, because I don't think there's anything quite as electric as the NHL playoffs. College football is incredible. Rivalry games, that's all amazing. We're going to talk about a couple of those from CSU's history when we get into the top 10 wins of the last decade. But man, what a thrill, what a drug hockey playoffs are. Also, and just appease me for a second here, it is so dumb that the NHL and the NBA couldn't work together and not have the game sevens overlap. First time the same city has had two game sevens on the same day since actually Dallas in 2002. And I just think it's such a shame that you're going to have to split your attention. You're either going to have to half ass watch both games with multiple screens, or you just pick one. And I don't understand why the leagues would want to split a local audience like that. I understand the NBA and the NHL have their own interests. They both want that primetime window. One's on ESPN, one's on TNT. I get all of that. I just I don't get why the NHL especially wouldn't be willing to maybe do a matinee or something like that. I know that primetime window is more optimal, but you're gonna lose to the NBA. Like you are going to lose viewers on a national level. The NBA is gonna trump you, and then you're splitting your potential local viewers. I just don't understand that at all. I also don't understand why Twitter and Google don't function anymore. Trying to get this show prepped, I've got a Google Doc, and God, man, the Google search is just terrible now. I know they put all their focus on AI. Same thing with Twitter, and I'm not even saying this from like a political standpoint. I know that people get in their weird lanes when it comes to Twitter and Elon and all that. I'm not even talking about that. I'm just saying from a functionality standpoint, as somebody who relies on these pretty intensively for his career and somebody who has pretty much perfected, the old way of search engines. It's just very frustrating that nothing works right these days. But let's get into the main stuff here. I've been rambling about dumb shit for too long now. If you missed it, CSU basketball has completed their transfer class. No surprises in there, but the Rams bring in a couple of four-star prospects. It is the best transfer class in program history. Josh Pasquarelli, Brandon Rechsteiner, both considered four-star transfers. Kerry Booth, Jace Butler, both considered three-star transfers, but both those guys were four-star prospects coming out of high school. CSU also brings in Augustinus Cutulis, who is a four-star prospect, depending on what site you look at. I'm really intrigued by this group on top of what's already a pretty exciting freshman class. I think JoJo McKeever and Dr. Tedeschi, both of those guys have an opportunity to be good players in this program. I think they're both great fits offensively. I think Docker probably redshirts as a freshman, but we shall see. Got a quote here from Ali in the press release. I am excited to welcome this group of young men to Colorado State men's basketball's family. Whenever we recruit people to our program, it's not just about being highly skilled and talented, but being high-level humans. The foundation built here the past 7 years by Nico Carvacho, David Roddy, Isaiah Stevens, Jalen Lake, Neat Clifford, and many more is a standard recognized around the nation. I cannot wait for June to arrive and have everyone on campus to compete and build the next generation of CSU men's basketball. If you've been locked into the content, you're well aware of all these guys. We've gone in on them on the podcast. I broke the news regarding most of these guys' commitments as well. But Kerry Booth, 6'10", 215-pound power forward. You got Jace Butler, combo guard, 6'4", 180. He comes over from Washington. Augustinus Cutulis, 6'8", 215-pound four. He comes over from the Virginia Military Institute. Don't sleep on him. Him and Pasquarelli, 6'3", 195-pound combo guard from Marist, I think are the highest ceiling, at least in terms of year one in the program. I think those guys are going to be huge. And then, Brandon Rechsteiner is somebody who I think can be a perfect fit at point guard in this program. 6'1", 190-pound junior. He was a top 100 recruit coming out of high school, son of Scott Steiner, Big Papa Pump. Gave one of the greatest wrestling promos in history. The anniversary of that was a couple of days ago, classic Steiner math. So an intriguing class. I think the staff did a really nice job of putting this group together. I think they did a good job of addressing holes and positions of need to put this program in position to be competitive and have a chance to contend, hopefully for a conference championship, at least be in the mix there. Going to be a challenge putting this many new pieces together, but you do have some continuity from the roster as well. A couple of the guys that stuck around. So we'll see how all that plays out. I think Ali did a really good job, and I'm very optimistic going into year one. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. All right, let's get into the latest CSU football edition. Real quick, though, we need to take just a breather and shout out a couple of our awesome partners. 100% pure nicotine, always tobacco free. Lucy is awesome. Lucy breakers are nicotine pouches with an extra surprise. Each pouch holds a capsule that can be broken open to release extra flavor and hydration. What's really cool about Lucy is you can set yourself up with a subscription. You can get it mailed straight to your door, so you don't have to go to the gas station every time you need your nicotine fix. I like cinnamon, I like mint, I like mango. I'm not hard to please, but the fruity ones are typically my favorite. I also love that Lucy has a 4 milligram option. Sometimes 3 doesn't quite hit it. 6 or 8 can be a little bit overwhelming. I love that 4. It's kind of the sweet spot. Level up your nicotine routine with Lucy. Go to lucy.co/DNVR. If you use the promo code DNVR, you can get 20% off your first order. Lucy has a 30-day refund policy if you change your mind. Again, that's lucy.co. Use that code DNVR to get 20% off. Here comes the fine print. Lucy products are only for adults of legal age. Every order is age verified. Warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. Whenever I do the warning part, it makes me think of Kevin in The Office when they're reading Robert California's notebook. Warning. Warning, Toyota is awesome. The official vehicle of DNVR. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA. For generations, Toyota's built durable legends destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. Whether you're conquering off-road trails or hauling the weight of the world, there's a Toyota truck that's just right for you. Check out the Tacoma or the Land Cruiser. Toyota offers 17 models with available all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive like the Epic 4Runner. They also offer more low and zero emission vehicles combined than any other automaker to give customers numerous choices to reduce their carbon footprint. Toyota SUVs take command on the road and on the trail so you can explore the road less traveled without sacrificing those smooth city rides. Visit your Front Range Toyota stores at a location near you, AutoNation Toyota, Arapahoe, Centennial. And remember, Toyota is a proud partner of CSU Athletics and the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. Cool. If you wouldn't mind giving us a thumbs up on YouTube, if you've got any questions, comments, etc., throw them my way in the Toyota chat. I will get to as many of them as I can. If I don't get to it right away, we will star it and come back to it at the end of the show. Appreciate everybody's support, rocking with us on a Friday morning. I know a lot of you probably were up late watching that Avs game, but let's talk a little CSU football. I had said a couple of times over the last month or so that I felt like CSU could really use a boost in depth at wide receiver as well as edge rusher this week. CSU has gone out and picked up commitments from both of those areas. We talked about Paul Tangelo the other day. I think he is a big time addition. He's going to have to refine some things in terms of his approach, kind of out physicaled everybody at the lower level, just bull rushes people. He's got a quick first step, long arms. I like what I see him. He's been productive in the backfield, but I do think he's going to have to, add some moves to the arsenal to be able to be as effective at this level as he was at some lower levels. But now Petey Tucker, 6'2", 195-pound Georgia State transfer wide receiver, out of DeMatha Catholic High School initially in Maryland, then went to Lackawanna College. That's actually where the edge rusher's from initially as well. I think I said the other day I thought they were in the Jayhawk League. Turns out that's a JUCO in Pennsylvania. Spent this past season at Georgia State after 2 years at Lackawanna. He had 8 touchdowns his sophomore year. Like that production, 11 over 2 seasons total of JUCO ball. Not crazy numbers or anything like that, but he did have a fairly productive season. I mean, 30 catches this past year, 324 yards. He did not find the end zone with Georgia State, but he did have 11 touchdowns in the 2 seasons prior. Comes to CSU, assumingly, with 1 year to play, although eligibility seems to have become a moving target. So we'll see. And I know the JUCO stuff has changed things, so maybe he'll actually have 2 years. I haven't seen a ton of him in terms of film. I don't want to sit here with a straight face and be like, man, I was watching all this Georgia State football and here's all these bold takes, but There is a little bit of video of him available, both from his time at Lackawanna and his time at Georgia State. Obviously, they're only going to show the good in those cut-ups. You're not going to show the moments where you miss a block or where you don't run a route the right way, you don't complete the play, etc. But just in terms of what we have seen in a fairly small sample size of video, it seems like at Lackawanna was more of a vertical threat. When you look at the clips, it's just a lot of go routes, it's a lot of posts, and he's got long strides. 6'2", 295 pounds, decent size, which I do think is big for a receiving room that as I've said numerous times throughout the spring, was lacking size with the departure of Lewis Brown. He gives you some depth. I don't foresee him as a starting wide receiver based on what I've seen so far. But again, that's a really small sample size, so I'm not trying to come to conclusions before we've even been able to have an opportunity to see him in person and camp and all that. But I think he is somebody that gives you a little bit of versatility. I think you could line him up out wide and try and use him as a vertical threat like he was used at Lackawanna, although I don't know if he's a true burner per se, but I do think he runs really well, got long strides. I think you could line him out wide and get him involved in the screen game. Saw a lot of that at Georgia State, and we know that Norvell loves those little bubble screens out wide. He's somebody that I could see being impactful there just because he is a little bit bigger, harder to bring down in the open field. I also think you could line him up inside, though, and be kind of a slot option. You lost Dylan Goffney. I could see him filling a Goffney-esque role, running crossers, slants occasionally, up the seam. In general, they're just going to have to be able to attack the middle of the field with much more consistency than they did a year ago. But I like the addition. Again, like I don't think you should come in expecting him to light up the world. It's certainly possible that he could outperform expectations or that he could serve a much bigger role than I'm anticipating. But I do think he's a nice depth piece. He's somebody who comes in with 3 years of experience of collegiate football. It's making a big jump, obviously, but you needed depth. You needed another big-bodied receiver, and if he's somebody that can be even remotely relevant in the run blocking game, then I really think that's going to open up a path to playing time. Because if I have any concerns about the receiving core as a whole, other than just kind of how unproven they are top to bottom, I do wonder how they're going to hold up in run blocking, just given that they don't really have, a 6'3", 6'4" guy out there that's going to be, Warren Jackson, setting the edge. We'll see. Maybe somebody proves me wrong. Maybe somebody's a little bit scrappier than I anticipated. But even like Torrey Horton was a really good run blocker. That's actually something that was felt with his departure, with his injury this past year. I think obviously you look at the lack of, or you look at what you're losing, in terms of receiving production, and that's significant. But just the lack of able and willing run blockers the Rams had out wide, I feel like kind of limited what CSU was able to do from a scheme standpoint. As a whole, I'm hoping there are a lot of things that get opened up with the offense. I want to see more play action. I want to see them create vertically off of the run game, which I do think should still be a strength given what you have in the backfield. But I think if you have some receivers that can block with consistency, it allows you to run outside better, some of those stretch plays and stuff like that. And I do feel like at times they were a little limited with what they were able to do. So if he's a guy that can contribute on special teams, if he can be a run blocker for you, that's a great way to get on the field and obviously make the most of those opportunities. I don't want to act like we know everything about him based on a couple of small clips, but that's kind of my general observations on him to this point. There were some clips from his freshman year where it looked like he was catching with the body a little bit too much. Didn't see that quite as much in the Georgia State clips. So maybe that's an area where he's grown over the years. I'm intrigued by him. I think he could be somebody that ends up being a nice little role player for you within this offense. Hopefully we can have him on the pod at some point, or, get to know him in fall camp and give you guys an idea of who he is, not just as a football player, but as a person. I try and get as many of these transfers on the show as possible. As far as where CSU goes from here, again, I do think they've done a good job of filling their positions of need through the portal. Felt like they could use another edge rusher. They went out and got one. Mentioned they could use a receiver. They got one of those as well. you can never have enough interior defensive linemen. Could never have enough offensive tackles. I would like to see DT would probably be number one if I was like, man, it'd be nice to have one more body to put out there. Just somebody you can put in the interior. They're hard to come by though. Offensive tackle as well. I feel pretty good about the line based on what we saw in spring, but you can just never have too many capable guys that are willing to step in. And then kicker. I've said it a couple of times now, but I'm not sure that the starting kicker is on the roster. Maybe it'll be Brian being the kicker and the punter. We'll see. But yeah, those are kind of the last positions of need that are glaring to me. I mean, anytime you could add another receiver, another corner, whatever, yeah, you'd love to do it. But I don't think those are glaring needs, assuming that a couple of these guys are healthy. You didn't have Armani Winfield in the spring. I think you're going to be depending on him at receiver. Jahari Rogers, former 4-star player, I think is somebody that'll contribute for you at corner. He missed most of, if not the entire spring. Aiden Hector missed a lot of the spring. Like a lot of these guys that will be on the 2 deep, that assuming they stick around, will get a better look come August. And I've tried to say that a couple of times now. Like spring is important for the youngins, especially, but I think it's easy to come to conclusions prematurely based on a small sample size of practices. So that's something to keep an eye on, going into next year. If you missed it, by the way, Jordan Noyes has signed to play in the Canadian Football League. He signed with the Calgary Stampeders. Great name. Calgary, kicking in Calgary has got to be tough. I imagine it's pretty tough kicking on the frozen tundra up there, and in cattle country and in Canada. But cool that he has a professional opportunity. You never know, could potentially pave a way to the NFL for him. But I'm really happy for him, and I wasn't sure if I should share this information over the last couple of weeks, but he, because of some of the recent changes in policy, he and his family were set to be deported. I don't really understand why. Had a work visa, had a job. Again, not getting into this from a political standpoint, but I didn't really understand how he was somebody who would qualify for that. But it's awesome that he has an opportunity here to, potentially continue his professional football career, because I think he's as good as any kicker that CSU's had in any time recently. And I think he's got the leg strength and has the clutch gene to be somebody that could be an NFL kicker. So I'm rooting for him. I really enjoyed conversations with him over the last couple of years. Obviously hit some really big kicks for CSU. Had a couple of kicks that should have been even bigger had, some Freddie Banks defenses not come up short and ultimately allowed the other team to come straight back down the field. I always think back to that 55-yarder he drilled on the road against UNLV. Like that should have been one of the all-time kicks in CSU football history. And instead, it's an afterthought because they allowed UNLV to go right down the field and kick a game-winning kick themselves. So rooting for Jordan Noyes. Shout out to him. Cool to see him in the CFL. We're going to get into who has the best opportunity to potentially make the roster outside of Torrey Horton this upcoming fall. Then we're going to get into the top 10 football wins of the last decade. Let's take one more quick break. Let's shout out a couple of our other partners, and then we'll get into all that stuff. Volo is Denver's most popular provider of adult social sports leagues. Pickup games and events. Sports offered include soccer, volleyball, pickleball, kickball, basketball, cornhole, and many more. It's pickleball sport. I don't know. It's like a pool sport. You can play in Lodo. You can play in Rhino, Highlands, City Park, Cherry Creek, South Broadway, and more. Playing with Volo is a great way to meet new people, to make friends, to be social. It's a great way to, stay active and be healthy. I personally feel like playing a pickup basketball game is so much more enjoyable than getting on the treadmill or running laps or something like that. It's just a good way to mix up your after work routine as well. Players can sign up as a free agent, so you don't need a full team. If you're panicked about that, it's fine. You can just join any team. You can come in with a small group or a full team if you want. They've got leagues for all ability levels and backgrounds. Use the code DNVR10 and get $10 off any Volo Denver league. I also want to shout out one of our longest partners, one of the OGs, if you will, and that, of course, is Breckenridge Brewery. Nobody does it like Breck Brew. Check out their new West Coast style IPA, Ridge Runner. This double dry hop brew is inspired by the untamed beauty of Colorado's trails, creates bright notes of citrus and pine. Breckenridge is the official craft beer of DNVR. They've got a beer for any occasion. There's no better way than kicking back, taking in the action than with an ice cold Breck Brew in hand. They've been doing it for like 35 years, and it all comes down to love and passion for making good beer, made with 100% renewable energy, too. You love that. Check out the Breck Beer Locator at breckbrew.com and find a brew near you. And then we've got some big and little news to share with you. ALLCITY, including us here at DNVR, we have teamed up with Big Brothers Big Sisters of America for an exciting 3-year partnership. This isn't just about sports, it's about community. Together, we're combining Big Brothers Big Sisters' incredible youth mentoring programs with the passion and power of ALLCITY's local sports coverage to create something truly meaningful. Our partnership kicked off during the NFL draft, but it's going to continue year-round. We're going to work to support Big Brothers and Big Sisters through fundraising, through content and events, and even opportunities for our team. Maybe some of you would like to get involved. If you are, you should check it out. We're excited to support youth mentorship that really makes a difference. You can learn more and see how to get involved at bbbs.org/allcity. That's bbbs.org/allcity. Really cool stuff. I'm really proud of what we're doing with that partnership. And, obviously we're all about sports at DNVR and within the greater ALLCITY network, but we're also really big on community. I talk about how much it means to me and how much CSU folks mean to me. And, we're nothing without the people that are in our corner. And this is a great way to help out some that are, in our greater community that could certainly use it. So really, really cool. Yeah. All right. We're not going to go the full hour today. Pretty much guarantee it unless I get to rambling. But let's go through and have a little bit of fun. Just talk about the top 10 wins for CSU football in the last decade. This is a topic we revisit, if not every offseason, probably every couple years. I've certainly done something similar at various points in previous years, but it's also something that's ever changing. You get a couple of big wins and all of a sudden you got to go back to the list. I'm a big Bill Simmons fan. He's constantly tweaking the, top 20 players of all time and all that. And it's a similar concept. So I'd love to hear your feedback. I'd love to hear what games I'm overrating. I'd love to hear what games you felt like should have made the cut. But these, in my opinion, are the top 10 wins for CSU football. And I'll kind of explain why. Every win has different reasoning. Sometimes it's just you beat a really good team. Sometimes it has to do more with the bigger picture and what that win meant in the grand scheme of things. So I guess without further ado, let's just jump into it, and we'll start at 10, work our way up. San Diego State in 2016, November 26, 2016. CSU with under Mike Bobo, they go into Qualcomm, I believe it still was at the time, and they beat down a 9-win Aztecs team. Now, San Diego State had already locked up a spot in the Mountain West Championship game, so I understand that they didn't have a ton to play for, and you can make that argument, and I think it's fair. But I think that's the most dominant that a CSU offense has looked in the last decade against a quality opponent. Again, maybe they didn't have the same motivation levels as the Rams did at that stage of the season, but it's an SDSU team that went 9-3. It's a San Diego State team that had really bullied the Rams, in the years leading up to it. And this was kind of the statement win of the Bobo era. Now, obviously, it got followed up by one of the statement losses of the Bobo era, which was to Idaho. In the Potato Bowl, it was another thriller. The offense there for like a 4 or 5 week stretch in late 2016, and then again in like early to mid 2017 under Nick Stevens was really, really impressive. I understand why people look at the Bobo era the way that they do, and how much frustration there was, and how many missed moments and all that. Like, I'm not telling anybody they're wrong, but that dude knew how to scheme an offense, and I think he's a brilliant play caller. I really do, even to this day. But this was a beatdown, man. It was like pouring rain, and CSU goes out there and they just lay it on the Aztecs. 42 points in the first half. At one point, it was like uh, 56-24 or something like that. Again, they win 63-31 in the end. The Rams put up 507 yards of total offense. You get a big game from Dalen Dawkins and Izzy Matthews. Both those guys go over 100 yards. Kinsey had 60 yards as well. You get a combined 3 rushing touchdowns out of the group. Michael Gallup has a couple of receiving touchdowns in the win. Robert Ruiz, there's a throwback name for you. He housed a punt and caught a touchdown. I always love games like that where the glue guy gets his opportunity to shine. But that's one of the moments when I look back on, I just can't help but think, had 2 or 3 games gone differently in 2015 and 2016, and obviously 2017 with the collapse, like how different is the Bobo era? I'm not sure he would have even gotten to 2017 in Fort Collins if, like the Minnesota and CU games go differently. They lose both those games in overtime, but either of them could have gone the other way. But yeah, I just feel like that's the most dominant we've seen the offense look at any point in the last decade. Obviously, that doesn't include the 2014 season. With Garrett Grayson, the offense looked pretty damn good there as well. But I'm not sure if I can even point to a game in 2014 that was more impressive offensively against a legit opponent. I mean, they walloped some teams that year, like Savannah State and stuff, and they put up some pretty big numbers on a lot of teams. But to score 63 on the road against a 9-win San Diego State team that was known for defense and dictating the tempo and running the football at the time, I just thought that was a fun one. Keeping it rolling here, going to number 9, we're going to go with the first win of the Jay Norvell era, October 7th, 2022. CSU goes into Reno. They beat the Nevada Wolfpack 17-14. Weird game. Had 2 defensive touchdowns, one on a game-winning field goal that came after Nevada picked up a roughing the kicker penalty. So, there was a lot of wonkiness. CSU won the game despite having 138 yards in penalties and only throwing for 78 yards and a couple of picks. Offensively, it was a struggle. Avery Morrow was a beast in that game. He's the big reason why the Rams were able to win as well. Played ball control in that second half. Again, first win of the Norvell era felt weirdly important just with all of the weird dynamics going into that matchup. You had Jeff Choate talking just a ton of trash about Norvell and the way he conducted himself. Obviously, you had Nevada fans that just absolutely hated CSU for taking the guys in the portal. I understand their frustration, but I just feel like coming off of an 0-4 start in the non-conference slate where CSU basically just got throttled in 4 straight games, including by an FCS team, this was one they needed to win. You knew that by that point that it wasn't going to be a bowl season. You knew that it wasn't going to be a championship season or anything like that, but you just needed something to give you reason to believe in the future of the program. And had CSU gone into this game and, gotten their butts kicked by a bad Nevada team and fell to 0-5 and lost to the team that you just took a coach and all these players from, I really feel like it would have been brutal for the program. And it's not a rivalry win or anything like that, but there weirdly was a lot of intensity going into that matchup. And I think it was one that both sides really wanted. And I think it was one of the key early wins in the Norvell tenure. All right, keeping it going here at number 8, we've got a win from this past season, actually, the 21-13 win over Air Force on October 19th. CSU's first win in the spring since 2002. This was one where at one point it looked like the Rams were going to blow them up. You go up 21-0 early in the third. End up having to hang on after Air Force comes storming back and pulls within 1 possession late. But this was another one of those games you just needed to find a way to grind it out and take it. You knew it wasn't going to be pretty against Air Force. It almost never is. But finding a way to win this one in a building you hadn't won in over 2 decades was significant. And I know that the season didn't end up, finishing how any of us would have hoped. They blew their chance to play their way into the championship game, get their butts kicked in Fresno, and then, just really drop an egg in the bowl game. But there were there were some pretty fun moments this past season, and we'll actually talk about another rivalry win. I'm sure you can guess which one it was a little bit later in the list. But at number 7, we are going Wyoming, but we're going 2015, November 7th, 2015. This was actually the first time I ever went to a game in Laramie. The Rams, they throttled them 26-7, and it was almost a shutout. Brian Hill ended up scoring for Wyoming with like 2 minutes left, but CSU basically just took him out of the game. He was considered the best running back in the league at the time, was having a really big season, and CSU just shut him down. Like, he scored that touchdown late in garbage time, which took away the shutout, which was a bummer, but 21 carries for 65 yards, 3.1 a pop for him. The defense really, really took him out of this one. Dalen Dawkins had a big game, 140 yards on the ground. Izzy Matthews scored twice. It was a fun memory, man. It was cold up in Laramie. The wind was blowing. I actually went with my dad. It was a lot of fun. We were watching in the stands, and then afterwards, there was a CSU exhibition on the basketball side against Metro State, and he sat in the student section with me and a couple of my buddies from school. So it was one of those memories that I just look back on fondly. Anytime you can win against a rival and dominate them the way that CSU did up in Laramie, it's going to make the list. I mean, there was a stretch there, 2013 and 2015, where CSU just back to back went up there and kicked Wyoming's ass. Be nice to see CSU do that again. They've had a couple of wins at home, but haven't won in Laramie since that day. Number 6, we're sticking with the border war. November 5th, 2020, 34-24 win. First win for CSU in over a calendar year. Obviously, the pandemic factored into that. They didn't play that many games, but went over a year without a win. It was the first one over Wyoming since 2015 or 2016. 2015, I think, right? Because 2016 was the first Josh Allen loss. It honestly, to me, CSU was not really the better team that night. I kind of felt like Wyoming was. They had a couple of big momentum plays early that really played a big factor. Starting the game with a pick six was huge, and then Trey McBride scores from Patrick O'Brien a couple of minutes later. Really hot start, which was crucial, and then the Rams just kind of were able to hang on for dear life after that. After going up 24-7, Wyoming, kind of makes it interesting. I feel like Wyoming was maybe the better team in 2020, but CSU was the better team in 2022 and lost. So kind of evened out. But this was a special moment on multiple levels. I will say it did take some of the excitement out of it with the fans not being in the stands. It felt a little hollow in that regard, but it would have been so heartbreaking had the McBride Bros not gone through had the McBride Bros gone through the program without a single rivalry win. So to me, like, I'll always look back on that fondly, just because we're in the heart of the pandemic. Everything just feels so bleak. Like, we're not even sure if there's gonna be sports in the spring. Like, it was just such a weird time. And to get that win, even though the fans weren't able to be there in person, but to see Trey and Toby, hold the bronze boot up was huge. And I'm just glad that they were able to at least get one. 2021 ended up being another one of those frustrating ones, and I'll never forget how pissed Trey looked post-game. He was a great sport that year. I thought that might be the moment he turned on Adazio publicly. He said all the right things, and he played it perfectly from a professional sense. But they were fed up by then, and I don't blame them. How do you not get him in the end zone? All right, keeping it going. At one point, one of the crazier comebacks I'd seen, I mean, it wasn't the 2013 New Mexico Bowl or anything like that, but we've had a couple of them in recent years, and we'll obviously talk about one. Taylor brings up the Boise State Miracle. We'll definitely get to that. But I got the Arkansas win on September 8th, 2018. I do think it should be top 5 just because SEC win in your building. How many opportunities are you going to be able to say that as a program? I will say, one of the flukier wins CSU has ever had. They did not play well. Arkansas goes up, what was it? It was 27-9 halfway through the third quarter. They're running for like 8 yards a pop, and for whatever reason, Chad Morris and Arkansas, they just get cute. They start trying to throw the ball, get a couple of 3 and outs. All of a sudden, Preston Williams catches a couple of touchdowns, and the Rams end up scoring 25 unanswered from the late third quarter and fourth quarter, beat Arkansas. I'll never forget sitting in the press box and looking over. There's a glass window you can see into the visiting AD's box. It was like the Arkansas AD and Jerry Jones, the Cowboys owner. And I honestly had a hard time watching the last couple of minutes of the game just because I was so locked in on Jerry Jones' face and watching him just be completely stunned at what was happening. The fact that his Arkansas Razorbacks were about to lose to a Mountain West team, it was incredible. I loved it just purely from petty reasons. It was amazing. The best Preston Williams game of his CSU tenure. The season as a whole was brutal. I would say 2018 through 2021 is up there with, like the end of the Fairchild era and then some of those just brutal stretches in the 80s that were probably the worst, stretches in CSU football history. That 2018 team, I've had former players come on the show and say it themselves, so I don't think this is me being a hater, but that team quit. Like they just were soft and was not a fun year. But that Arkansas game was unreal. It was one of the dumber results I've ever seen, but it was unreal. Number 4, we've got the Wyoming win from this past season, 24-10. Honestly, one of the more lopsided games that went in CSU's favor between the border war wins they've had over the last 2 decades. There've been a couple of them, 2015, 2013. But this was huge. You had beat Air Force, but you needed this one if you were Norvell. After laying an egg against CU at home, had they won that game, it most certainly would have cracked the list, but they needed it in a major way. And in some ways, I felt like this was a statement win. Obviously, it kind of proved to be fool's gold. If you would have asked me that night, I would have said that CSU feels like a legitimate contender just with the way that they were able to handle business in that type of setting. And I actually think Wyoming is a better team than their record proved to be in the end. And they showed that fight with how they hung against Boise State and San Diego State in the weeks after. Offensively, they were a disaster. They end the game with like 3 straight drops. I've never seen anything like it. That team did quit, at least the offense. I would say their defense played their asses off. Reminded me kind of CSU in 2022, where you feel like the effort was there. You just couldn't muster enough offensively to realistically have a shot in it. But first time you're able to bring home 2 major trophy wins in a decade, it was a big moment. It was fun. You got to have the fans in the stands this time, unlike 2020, seeing those guys, Dane Olson and everybody, run over the bronze boot and pick it up and celebrate together. Jacob says it perfectly in the Toyota chat. The border war vibes from this past year were impeccable. The vibes were immaculate. It was as much fun as I've had, throughout the Norvell era. Number 3, Boise State comeback. October 14th, 2023. CSU pulls it off 31-30. First win over Boise State in program history. Boise led by over 20 with under 5 minutes to go. They still led by 2 touchdowns with 2 minutes to go. And CSU able to give them a little bit of payback for the 2017 collapse. Now, both of these teams have been on either side of a really wonky comeback win, but unreal. Dallin Holker hauls in the holy Holker from BFN. BFN sets it up with just a dime to Torrey Horton. Still probably the most impressive throw, I would say, of the Norvell era, of the BFN era under center. This was one of those that felt like you got a monkey off your back as a program. Boise had been the big bad bully, and they had been somebody who CSU, for whatever reason, couldn't get through. Like, they had plenty of chances there. Bobo played them tight a couple of times, wasn't able to pull it off. Even Daz played him relatively competitively in one of his matchups. The second one, first one, not so much at all. But you needed it, right? Like, it just felt like that win, it weighed a little bit more. Now, obviously, you don't end up making a bowl game that year, which is a shame. But one of the craziest results I've ever seen, up there with the 2013 New Mexico Bowl, Probably depends on what day of the week you ask me in terms of which one is crazier. I think the New Mexico Bowl was slightly wonkier just because of all the Shaq Barrett strips. Then you have like the Donnell Alexander. It was either a touchdown or a 2-point conversion where they initially say he was out, but it wasn't even close. Like there was just so many dramatic moments in that New Mexico Bowl. But man, the Boise State game, for those of us that stuck around, and obviously I had to because I work the games, but for the fans that actually chose to stay for the entire thing, they were blessed to witness something truly historic. And same goes for the Utah State game this past year. I didn't actually put that in the top 10, but it was up there as well in terms of just craziness. At number 2, November 19th, 2016, CSU beats New Mexico 49-31 in the final game at Hughes Stadium. I know some people will hear New Mexico and roll their eyes a little bit, just given that CSU's owned New Mexico. That was a bowl team, though. That was a 7-win Lobos team. They had Austin Apodaca under center. They were pretty potent offensively. I mean, obviously they scored 31 points, but that was just a really special night. It was a celebration of over 50 years of history in that building. So many incredible moments over the years, going back to the 60s and 70s, and obviously everything that happened under Lubick and even, the McElwain era. It was a really emotional night. I'll never forget what it was like being in the stands as, the clock ticks down. You really realize like, oh my God, this is it. Like this is the last time I'm ever going to be in this stadium that has meant so much to so many of us over the years, that we've had so many special moments in. Offensively, you had 3 running backs go for 100 yards. I think that's the only time I've ever seen that happen. Izzy went for 107, Marvin went for 127, and Dalen went for 102, all of them with 10 carries apiece. You actually had 4 different players rush for a touchdown. Nick Stevens and Dietrich Clark also rushed for scores. It was just a really fun night. It was colder than hell. One of the colder games I've been to from a CSU standpoint. I had the full-on like Arctic parka on and still was straight up shivering in the stands. Need a little bit more liquid blanket that night, if you know what I mean. But it was a really special moment. I'm really glad that I was there for it. I'm glad I got to be in the stands for it too. I believe, that was the last game that I have, last college football game I've watched from the stands as a fan. I've been in the press box for every game since. So it's a really special moment in CSU history, one I'll always look back on. And that brings us to number 1, which was August 26th, 2017, the 58-27 win over Oregon State in the opening of Canvas Stadium. It's the most hope CSU has had as a fan base in the last decade, I would say. That's a tight game at halftime, and the Rams just open it up in the second quarter, or in the third quarter, in the second half. Goodness gracious. Outscored 34-0 over those final 2 quarters and really just put a thumping on. Starts with Trey Thomas. 44-yard pick 6. Huge game from Nick Stevens. He had 334 yards and 3 touchdowns. Did have 1 interception, but we're nitpicking there. Izzy Matthews scored the first touchdown for CSU. Dalen Dawkins had a touchdown in the game, or had a receiving and a rushing touchdown in the game. The vibes that day were amazing, and it just felt like there was so much hope for the future. Like at that point, obviously everybody was still kind of barely holding on to a hope that CSU would get the Big 12 invite. That didn't happen for a variety of reasons, but it just felt like we were on the verge of something big time and something special. And I've talked about it a lot. I do feel like the 5-6 years after 2017 were such a massive missed window for this program. It's so unfortunate that we had an administration that just frankly didn't have high enough standards, and then allowed kind of a mediocre program to just stay stagnant for far too long. But obviously you're in a position now where you're coming off of a bowl appearance. You're coming off of the first season where you've had at least a chance to be in the conference championship game, where you're still in that mix in November since 2017. Got to build off of it this past season. It can't be the ceiling. It's got to be the floor. Hopefully we will see this program become what we all thought it could be when we were in Canvas Stadium that day. And the energy was electric and it was hot. It was really hot. You know, the final game at Hughes was about as cold as I've been at a football game. The first game at Canvas was about as hot as I've been at a football game. Extreme weather on both of those games. But I just hope we can see the energy that was felt in the building that day and feel it again, because there've been some fun moments. You know, the Boise State win, the Arkansas win, the Utah State comeback. All of those, though, were instances where you went down big, 60% of the stadium leaves, and you don't have the type of atmosphere in the stadium that you should for that type of, you know, significant and crazy win. And I just think back to that Oregon State game and what the energy was like, you know, in the fourth quarter, and seeing everybody celebrate and just being excited for what was to come. Like, I just hope to see the building feel like that again, because I don't think there's really been any moment that's even come close in terms of the atmosphere of Canvas Stadium that day. And obviously, like, the inaugural game, like, there's just going to be some stuff naturally that's going to be hard to replicate. But really what it was about was the fact that you stepped up and you played a really complete game against a Pac-12 team. And obviously now they're going to be conference mates, so a little bit different when you look back on it. But it just felt like such a significant win for CSU. It felt like they were on the verge of something special, and unfortunately ended up deflating, you know, about 6 weeks later after a nice little stretch in September. But I'll always look back on that day. If you go into the Collegian office on campus, you can still see my written piece. You know, it was like Rams bash Beavers in inaugural game at Canvas Stadium or something like that. Classic print headline zinger. But what a special day. I'll always look back on it fondly. That's all I've got for you guys today. It looks like we did end up going close to an hour anyways, which that figures once I get to rambling, time starts to fly. But I appreciate everybody that's rocking with us. I promise, you know, I know we've been a little erratic just in terms of the content schedule, and we haven't had quite as much written content as Ram fans are accustomed to from me. It's been a little chaotic in terms of the hockey stuff, but as soon as that comes to an end, you know, we're going to be right there locked in and really setting the scene for football, which is going to be here before we know it. So enjoy the off seasons and, you know, spend some time outside if you can. Go explore this incredible state. You know, get a tan going. I certainly could use it. But that's all I've got for you today. Much love, y'all. Always proud to be. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.